Sky News.
Welcome back. Josh Frydenberg and Ed Husick joined me this morning. Josh, first to you on this free trade agreement with China. It's been in the works for some time, more than a decade in fact. It looks like a deal will finally be done on Monday. But can you confirm it will be a staged agreement, meaning that you will sign on what you can on Monday, but it will leave room for negotiation going forward?
Well, Laura, negotiations are still continuing, but we're very hopeful we'll have a comprehensive agreement. Let's remember formal negotiations began in 2005, the same year that New Zealand began their formal negotiations with China. New Zealand concluded an agreement 3 years later in 2008, and we're in 2014 and Australia still doesn't have an agreement. So we're very hopeful we can succeed where Labor failed. We got an FTA with Korea, we got an FTA with Japan, and now we're going to hopefully get one with China.
Josh Frydenberg, that perhaps does beg the question though, what has Australia given up and conceded to get this deal across the line where successive governments before haven't?
Well, there's no doubt there will be a quid pro quo, and they want greater access in terms of investment into Australia. We want more access for our farmers and agricultural exports. Judging by reports, there's going to be some significant announcement around services and the ability for companies in Australia to export their services into China. I mean, China is growing at a rapid rate. It's the #1 trading partner for more than 130 countries in the world. You've got existing tariffs, for example, on milk for Australian exporters around 15%, whereas New Zealand is moving to zero tariffs. And, we need to be able to compete on a level playing field. Not only has New Zealand, but ASEAN and some of our key partners in the region have a free trade agreement with China. So we can't afford to see our exporters put at a competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis the markets in China. So this is a critical agreement for us. We will give and we will take, and it will be a negotiation, but I think it will set up the Australian economy for decades to come.
Ed Husick, you seem a little bit sceptical about the deal that has been done here, but just on the way it seems to be put together, what we'll see on Monday is this staged deal. Is that a good negotiation strategy? Lock in what you can and keep the lines of communication open?
Staged for the sake of an announcement, staged for the sake of getting media coverage, not an agreement that's for the sake of the national interest, but for the sake of meeting a politically motivated deadline, which reflects, again, a clumsy approach in international relations. We've already spoken about the approach of dealing with Russia on the issues we discussed earlier, and now what we've had is a scramble to have an announceable leading into the end of the year because the government said we are going to get this agreement done no matter what by December. Comparing New Zealand and Australia and the length of time that's taken between economies that are vastly different in size and nature, I don't think is an appropriate comparison. And certainly, where we want to be able to see a lot freer relationship or trading relationship, you've got, for instance, senior members of the Liberal Party arguing, for example, on a committee that I'm on, that we should start imposing fees on Chinese investors in real estate in the middle of a free trade agreement. We have a degree of secrecy that even the coalition are starting to balk on. You've seen Bill Heffernan, for example, the head of the Rural and Regional Affairs Committee, say...
What do you make of his concerns? The fact that we're doing this deal with China and China will refusing and have done so for so long to float their currency.
And he is saying that there's too much secrecy. It's not often that I'd be agreeing with Bill Heffernan, but he is saying that there's a degree of secrecy about this that's not right. And so from my perspective, what we're seeing is a rush to sign an agreement, get the media coverage, and then questions will be raised after as to whether or not it's in the nation's interest, just for the sake of ticking a box. I think it's better for us to get a deal that's in the national interest, not the political interest of the coalition.
Josh Frydenberg, just on that, was it a mistake in hindsight to set this political deadline? Did you give up some negotiating power in the process?
Absolutely not, because Tony Abbott always said that he will only sign a good deal for Australia. And obviously Ed hasn't spoken to many farmers recently because they're desperate for a deal like New Zealand has, because it opens up their exports into the biggest market outside of the United States. I mean, 1.3 billion people in China who are moving by their tens of millions into the middle classes every year, changing their dietary habits, changing their travel habits, changing their education needs.
Just on that, Josh, sorry to interrupt you, but we've only got about 30 seconds left. Can you confirm that the government will now turn attention to India and securing a free trade deal with that nation?
Absolutely. Our exports with India are 1/10 the size of our exports to China. India is again 1.2, 1.3 billion people. We've got a new Prime Minister, Prime Minister Modi.
Do you have a timeline for that?
No, I don't think we can set an exact time frame, but I think we can say,
Unlike what happened with China,
that if we can get a free trade agreements with China, Japan and Korea, then Indonesia and India are the next stops for Andrew Robb and his team.
All right, Josh Frydenberg, Ed Husic, thanks so much for joining me on AM Agenda today. Thanks for putting up with me. I know you usually like Kieran in the chair, but, you know.
No, this is an improvement.
Okay.
That wasn't on tape. He's not going to listen to this later, is he? Josh Frydenberg said that about Kieran, not me.
Kieran's busy getting his frequent flyer points. That's all right.
Okay. Well, I shouldn't have opened that Pandora's box, but thank you for joining me on the program this morning. Now, we'll take a short break and we'll AM Agenda after it.